Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Kize Kabazela, thank you for the opportunity to address you and your committee on this important topic of municipal audit outcomes. I'd like to also thank the honorable members for making themselves available for this presentation. Honorable Chair, honorable members, you are aware that the office has to audit all of the municipalities every year. I'm also required to consolidate the outcomes and offer a report, such as I'm doing today, that gives an analysis of the state of governance in local government. I want to start with just a couple of introductory remarks about where the office is and what's happening at the office. So if you look at the slide and the bottom left-hand corner, there's a red icon there. We put it there to tell yourselves as the key stakeholders of the Office of the AG and the recipients of our work that we have been acknowledged as a top employer, comparing favorably against employers that operate in both the public and private sectors. In essence, it reminds us that the 4,000 people that make up the staff of the AG's office are people who are benefiting from good human resource management practices, good talent development practices. A key part of our talent development is the graduate training program that we have. It is accredited by the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, and we assist young people to realize the ambitions of qualifying as chartered accountants and holding that much coveted designation of CASA, which you would know is the top trust graduates from university and have been working with us and supported by us in terms of preparing for their professional exams, and they've now completed that journey. These young people, the majority of whom are black, the majority of whom are women, are now available to not only serve the audit office, but importantly to serve the public sector and the economy of South Africa at large. So we're very proud of what we've been able to achieve in terms of helping young people achieve their own dreams, but also contribute to capacity building for South Africa. The other icon next to it says that we are chairing SCI 20, with South Africa holding the chairmanship or the presidency of G20. The Auditors-General of the G20 countries also have their own engagement platform, which is SCI 20, standing for Supreme Audit Institution 20. And we are engaged in a conversation together with my fellow AGs that is really questioning how we can add value into the system of governance in our respective countries, still being independent, but be seen and experienced to be a value-adding partner in governance and in development. Let me get on to today's agenda for now that I've done a bit of bragging about the audit office. The audits have been completed, and indeed the respective audit reports have been tabled in the different councils. We've also analyzed outcomes per province and engaged with the provincial leadership in each of the provinces. We've met with the legislature. We've also met with the executive in each of the provinces to talk to them about their outcomes. At this point now, we're able to share with you the national picture. The work that we do is still informed by the mission and vision of the office, which is about us serving as independent auditors of the state, all with a key mandate of contributing to strengthening democracy by using the fact that we audit and report and engage with different players in the ecosystem of accountability so that we equip them to do their work even better. Ultimately, the goal is to improve governance, to improve oversight, to improve transparency and accountability across the state. We've also informed our work by the strategy of the office, which really has us engaging with all stakeholders on how we can help them to improve their performance, their accountability, their transparency, and their institutional integrity. We know only too well that it is going to take many players in what we've called an ecosystem of accountability to change the culture in every institution within the public sector, to ensure that everyone that has responsibilities within government is seized with matters around performance improvements, around integrity, around transparency, and about accountability. This slide, which deals with the accountability ecosystem, is something that you would have seen many times. And in summary, it's us saying that every single public institution doesn't operate as an island. There are responsibilities for the people that run that institution, so the officials, the senior management, the municipal manager as accounting officer, the internal audit committee, and in the realm of municipalities, the mayor and the speaker and the council and impact. But beyond the boundaries of that institution, there are responsibilities that sit with the executive and administration at provincial level, as well as with the legislature at provincial level. There are also important responsibilities that sit with those that are in the national sphere. When we look at the governance arrangements within the country, we are convinced that if every single player in this ecosystem of accountability did their part well and consistently so, and if every single player was seized with ensuring that they collaborate and cooperate properly, we would have very few governance problems, unlike is the situation right now. What we've done in this report, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, is we've designated quite a bit of the chapters to look at the role of the executives that deal with provincial level COCTA. We've also spent quite a bit of time looking at the role of the mayors, because we are convinced once again that if you look at a municipality, there are significant duties, responsibilities, and authority that sit with the mayor and even with the speaker. And so when we audit, we don't just stop with the accounting officer, as important as that player is. We've got to think about whether or not the mayor and the speaker are doing what they're supposed to do. We often find it all too easy, I think even as South Africans, to look only at the role of the accounting officer, especially in the municipal space. If you look at the key provisions in the Municipal Finance Management Act, in the Municipal Systems Act, the role of the mayor and the speaker are actually very important. And when mayors do their part, things run well. And when they fail to do their part, things do not run so well. I'll come to that probably a little bit later on through the report. The outcomes themselves, I would like to draw your attention to the very last row on this slide, which depicts that when we started our audits, we would have had, when we started the analysis, we would have had 10 audits outstanding. However, we've been able to complete a number of those audits and are now sitting with 3 audits outstanding. Outstanding in that they are not yet completed. There are 3 auditees whose audits are not yet completed, and that is Mafube in the Free State, that is Maludia Pufong, also in the Free State, and that is also Tabachewu in Mpumalanga. Those 3 audits have not yet been completed because the submissions have not happened in the way that they should as yet. We hope that the municipalities will get the submission culture right. Because submitting financial statements is really the basic accountability action by anyone that's entrusted with managing public funds. So that some municipalities do not submit financial statements should worry all of us. Last year, which is 2024, there were a number of municipalities that submitted late. Other than these 3 that haven't submitted at all, there were a few that submitted late. Although on average, there's been an improvement, a gradual improvement in the submission of financial statements, timely submission of financial statements. We're concerned that, especially in the Free State, there are far too many municipalities that still don't submit their financial statements on time. The call to action we keep placing on this one is to the provincial leadership, because it is up to the provincial COCTA, provincial treasury, as well as the premier, to set the tone around what is tolerated in terms of at least this very basic thing of getting the financials submitted to the Auditor-General on time as required by law. We've now completed the audits for the ones that submitted late, and the outcomes are not great. Most of them had undesirable outcomes. And so even the ones I've mentioned where they've not bothered to submit, you'll know that they're characterized by governance challenges of real significance and even service delivery matters that should worry all of us. If we keep moving to the left from the blue, we get to the red, which is the disclaimer of audit opinion. The good news is that the disclaimers are continuing to come down. And that is credit to the provincial leadership in most of the provinces that have taken it upon themselves to support municipalities to come out of disclaimer. When we started with this new administration of local government following the 2021 elections, we had 28 disclaimers. We're now sitting at 14. It's still 14 too many. However, it does demonstrate that there has been attention to this area. The 7 adverse audit opinions are also concerning because those municipalities are those where they've submitted financial statements, but even based on our audit of the records that they would have given us to support the information they gave, we came to an opinion that we did not agree with those financial statements. In brief, it says that those financial statements are simply unreliable. They are not credible. We move then to the purple zone, which is the ones that have got qualified audit opinions. The qualified audit opinions are those where we say that the financial statements are incorrect in specific areas. At least we can tell you where the problems are. So it's better than adverse. But if you look at the fact that that's 35% of the base of municipalities across the country, the audits for MFMA 2024, we have made sure that the reports that we've completed are tabled in the respective councils. We've also analyzed the outcomes for each province and engaged the provincial leadership, specifically the provincial executive as well as the provincial legislature. We've also had the opportunity to engage with the national executive on the national picture, which is the one I'm privileged to share with you this afternoon. The outcomes that I would want to talk to, I would like you to attend to the very last line on the slide, the last row, which sets out the outcomes for the 257 municipalities across South Africa. When we started our analysis, there were 10 audits that had not yet been completed. Since then, we've completed 7 of those and have updated the numbers, and hence this updated number at the bottom of the screen. The reason we would have had 10 audits outstanding when we started the analysis is that sometimes municipalities do not submit their financial statements to us on time. The law says they should submit financials to us on the 31st of August so that we can audit and complete those audits by the end of November. Unfortunately, there is still a tendency amongst a number of municipalities to miss that submission deadline. So there were a number of late submissions and we were able to complete those. In terms of late submissions, which as the honourable members will recall, is a matter we would have raised before. There has been some gradual improvement across a number of provinces, especially in the northwest, where the provincial leadership played a big role in helping their municipalities to submit financial statements on time. The one province that is still struggling to get municipalities to submit financial statements on time is the Free State province. So that's the one where the provincial legislature and the provincial executive really need to take some bold action to ensure that that situation is addressed. There were 2 audits that were delayed due to audit process matters. There were disputes at Umsunduzi, which was ultimately completed following the conclusion of that technical dispute between the municipality and the audit team, and that municipality ended up with a qualified audit opinion. There was also a dispute and some delays at Machabeng, and that audit was subsequently completed, so the people of Velcom have now got an audit report available to them, which is a qualified audit report. Coming to the three that are still outstanding, there are three audits that are still outstanding because the submissions have not yet been completed. Specifically, Maludia Pofong, Mafube, as well as Tabacheo. Tabacheo submitted their municipal accounts, but they didn't give us the financial statements for the entity, the development entity that is a subsidiary for the municipality. And so that's why we've not yet been able to have a full submission from them. Maludia Pofong, similarly, they had not consolidated their entity, so that submission is still to come, as is Mafube. The matter around submission, then, you can see is still a problem in the Free State, even with the ones that have not submitted. A little bit of good news is that the disclaimers of audit opinion are coming down. When we started with this administration that came into leadership following the 2021 local government elections, we had 28 disclaimer of audit opinion. And the honorable members would have heard us speak about how undesirable and intolerable a disclaimer of audit opinion is, especially when somebody is looking after public funds. The good news is that that matter seems to have enjoyed some attention from a number of provinces, especially the provincial leadership that supported a number of their municipalities to come out of disclaimer. And so we now are sitting with 14 disclaimers. It's still a matter that we need to find a way to address. This legacy of tolerating disclaimers of audit opinions is something we really need to leave behind. Then there are 7 adverse audit opinions. Adverse audit opinions is when we say that the financial statements are wrong. We do not believe that they can be relied upon by the users. Again, that's also completely intolerable. It's something we must be able to deal with. And then there are the qualified audit opinions, making up 35% of municipalities across the country. That's a big component of municipalities that are unable to publish credible financial statements. And the areas that they struggle with are quite important, and I'll come back to it now. But what I want to highlight is that when you've got so many municipalities that have not yet got the capability to compile credible financial statements, it raises a number of critical questions around competence of the people in the administration, but equally competence and discipline around the people in the political leadership. There should be no mayor that allows a situation where year on year there are qualified financial statements emerging out of his or her administration. Most municipalities have got CFOs that have got skills. It is still concerning that we have the expenditure budget of local government being handled by municipalities that can't get the financial statements right. The next category is the yellow one, which many municipalities like to celebrate. They'll say, well, the AG gave us an unqualified audit opinion on our financial statements, right? Our financial statements are credible. The challenge here, Chair, is that if a municipality is unable to deal with performance reporting and compliance, it tells you that you do not yet have the capability you need for that municipality to predictably do what they're supposed to do with the money in their hands. One of the things I did when I did roadshows with the teams that I lead within the audit office, we put up the list of the municipalities with unqualified audit opinions, and I merely asked them the question: if you were Minister of Finance or MEC Finance in this province, and you had aspirations that the municipalities in the province would drive infrastructure projects because you want to improve service delivery, you want to drive economic activity, and you want to create jobs, would you put money into those institutions and believe that they will do with it what you hope for? And the answer was no. And the simple reason is this: an unqualified with matters around performance information and compliance tells you that that institution doesn't have the culture of ensuring that they plan for what they're going to do, monitor what they're doing, execute in a disciplined way, and deploy public funds efficiently. It tells you that they do not yet have the internal controls and the standard operating procedures to give them a good chance of enhancing the quality of how they spend public funds. So, yes, it's good to have credible financial statements, but the underlying operations are still very weak. The governance arrangements are problematic. Maybe to zone in on this point one last time. Of the 99 with unqualified with findings, 71 of those gave us financial statements that were of poor quality when we started the audit. So if we had audited and stopped, 71 of the 99 would not have received an unqualified audit opinion on financial statements. It's important for me to raise this because I want to make the point that it tells you that financial management discipline in that environment is pretty weak. And then you've got the clean audits. The good news is that we are back to 41 clean audits, which is where we started back in 2021. So we're no more at the 34 that I talked about last year. However, that makes up 16% of the municipalities across the country. That tells you that only 19% of the municipal expenditure budget is being spent by municipalities that will predictively give you the outcomes you hope for, in that they have the disciplines and governance arrangements for you to trust that whatever money you send there will be spent in the way that you expect. So overall, in terms of summing up the story around outcomes for 2024. It's good that we've returned a few more clean audits. It's great that we are reversing this trend around disclaimers of audit opinion. However, the state of financial and performance management disciplines in local government still leaves much to be desired. And so the story in many ways is similar to what I would have shared before. I worry, honourable members, that I will sound like a stuck record this afternoon. Let's move on to the next slide, which deals with the outcomes for the metros. The 8 metros across the country look after half of the expenditure budget for local government. They look after service delivery that affects 46% of households across the country. Their budgets are quite significant. They sit in the centers of economic activity. And so, given the scale of their operations, the complexity thereof, but also the resources that they manage, and even their location, they should have no difficulty attracting the skills that they need to run their environments. Unfortunately, out of the 8, we've got only 1 clean audit, which is the City of Cape Town. It was the only clean audit last year as well. The 3 that sit in the unqualified space, City of Ekurhuleni, City of Joburg, and eThekwini. Of those, only City of Ekurhuleni gave us quality financial statements when we started the audit, and eThekwini. These 2 gave us quality financial statements when we started the audit, meaning that their ability to compile financial statements is quite strong. City of Joburg didn't give us quality financial statements when we began our audit. Now, that's a big city, the biggest in the country, the biggest on the continent. There should be no difficulty in ensuring that you've got the skills and the capability to do what you're supposed to do, just on compiling financial statements. The ones in the yellow zone also struggled with performance information. So eThekwini and COJ struggled with giving us credible performance information. Ekurhuleni did. They've got good performance information. The reason performance information is important is that if somebody doesn't give you a good performance report, it tells you that their ability to plan for performance, monitor the execution of their plans on an ongoing basis is quite weak. The Municipal Systems Act provides a very clear set of prescripts around what should happen with municipal performance planning. You've got the 5-year plan to the IDP, which is reviewed by MEC Cocta and his or her department, and then ultimately approved by council. You've got the SDBIP, which the mayor must be held accountable for, which then goes through the MEC Cocta and then ultimately goes into council for approval. And then you've got the quarterly reports, which are compiled by the MM and given to the mayor, which are ultimately also submitted to council. And then you've got the mid-year assessment, which looks at performance at the half year and adjusts budgets at that point. The mayor has big responsibilities in that regard. Section 54 provides significant authority for the mayor to deal with this. And they are then required to check if budgeted expenditure is being overshot and make the necessary adjustments and respond when there are problems. When we don't get good quality performance reports, it tells us that the process is quite broken. The quality of information being prepared and used for decision making in the quarter, at the half year, is poor. It says that the attention that the leaders of that municipality are paying to service delivery matters is suboptimal. We then come to the ones that have got qualified audit opinions. BCM, COT or City of Tshwane, Mangaung and Nelson Mandela Bay. Again, these sit in big centers. They should have the ability to attract and retain the skills that are required. However, if you look at those names, you'll know that they've had challenges around stability at council level, stability at administration level as well. And what it tells you is that the institutions have become weaker and weaker over the years, and they're simply not geared to do what they're supposed to do. Buffalo City Metro, a little fact, had a vacancy for the district engineer position responsible for electricity. And that vacancy has been there for 80 months, 80. Yes, 80 months. They have a similar vacancy on the district engineer responsible for sanitation, and that vacancy has been in place for 24 months. We've got to ask the question on where things fall apart. Why would a city like that struggle to get these critical technical skills that are there to help them drive service delivery and even look after assets? The continued weakening of institutions of these metros over time has led to a situation where their financial health has deteriorated. Many of them continue to be downgraded, 3 of them just this year. Has led to a situation where their infrastructure projects are not well managed. When we go visit their projects, we find that they're either delayed, or they are not commissioned, or the work is of poor quality, or they're overspending. It tells you that even the conditional grants that are sent to municipalities to get them to drive infrastructure projects are not being well used. Sometimes they go back into the fiscus, but often they're simply not well used. The weakening of these institutions is something that we need to arrest, and courageously, boldly, and urgently so. When you look at the complexity of a metro, and you consider the complexity of their operations, and you look at the scale of the budgets of these metros, one's got to really consider whether in the leadership of these metros we've got the type of people that are equal to the task. And by leadership, I'm talking not just about the city manager, but equally about the mayor and the speaker, etc. Because if we don't worry about that, we won't be able to build capability for the institution. And if we don't worry about that, we'll never even see consequence management or accountability happening in the way that we expect. The metros around infrastructure, so I talked about the new projects that we see, and we see many problems there. If you look at the deterioration of the existing infrastructure, it happens often because they don't budget for proactive maintenance on infrastructure assets that they currently have. The norm that the National Treasury has stated around the provision that should be made for infrastructure maintenance is that there should be 8% of the value of existing infrastructure set aside as a budget for repairs and maintenance, for regular maintenance. We're finding that most municipalities do not meet that 8%. In fact, a city like Tshwane, will budget 2% or 1% or something less than that. A city like Joburg also doesn't budget adequately for maintenance of existing assets. And so what happens is that these assets continue to deteriorate, and then the distribution losses increase, water losses, electricity losses. And then, of course, that creates a financial health problem, a viability problem. We also find that the deterioration of infrastructure affects the services that are available to citizens through interruptions or even the quality of the service that's then delivered. The metros, in our view, need particular urgent attention if we are to get them to become the centers of economic growth, infrastructure spend, and the centers that will genuinely make the lives of South Africans better. Right now, it would appear that we don't yet have that. The next slide deals with the matter around the submissions, which I was highlighting earlier on. What we did on this slide is we picked out 7 municipalities across the country that are problematic in terms of regular submission of financial statements. So you'll see that Ubuntu in the Northern Cape submitted financials on time in 2021-2022. However, 2022-23 and 23-24, those financials were submitted late. You'll see that we're pointing out that the Free State has significant problems in this regard. In 2022, we had late submissions for those 5 municipalities on the screen. In 2022-23, 3 of those submitted on time. And the reason that happened is that the year before then, we had highlighted to the then Premier the importance of setting the correct tone on the submission of financial statements. And so he asked us to check in with them a few days before submission and indicate if we were worried about submission, which we did. At that point, he called each of those mayors and said, you will come and submit those financials in front of me. And that's what happened. However, in 2024, this year that is under review, that didn't happen at the level of the Speaker, so we went backwards. These 7 municipalities that are habitual late submitters look after a budget of 6.85 billion, of which the equitable share together is 1.6 billion, and the conditional grants are 580 million rand. They look after over 300 households. We point this out to give you a sense of the scale of the problem and why it's important for the leaders at the provincial level and even at the national level to worry about these matters. The honourable members will be aware that I did submit a letter to the Honourable Speaker in accordance with the provisions of the Public Audit Act and the MFMA to highlight where the submissions had not been done on time and to ask her to refer the matter to the relevant portfolio committee in Parliament for follow-up. That's the nature of the governance arrangements that currently exist. The next slide deals with the disclaimer of audit opinions. As I said, the good news is that we're moving in the right direction. We're keeping a record of the journey on disclaimers because we wholeheartedly believe that this is something that's relatively easy to deal with if a different tone is set, and we must leave it behind. The Northwest, I'd like to point out, you'll see that many of the municipalities that were repeat disclaimers for years actually are getting out of that space over the last 2 years. And that's because the provincial leadership in the Northwest made work of this. Unfortunately, it's come at a significant cost. They spent this year hundreds of millions of rand helping these municipalities through consultant spend to submit financial statements that could be supported by evidence. So it's a matter that we are watching because the work can't stop there. This support must then be followed up with ongoing attention to the leadership and to building capability in those municipalities. However, I believe it's a good story around what's happened in the Northwest on these disclaimers. There are 3 that remain sticky in the Northwest: Lekwatemane, Ditsobotla, and Ratlong. These are municipalities that have been problematic for many years. you'll see that Ditjobotla has had a disclaimer of audit opinion for 8 years consecutively. And I don't think there's a South African that has not yet seen a headline around the dysfunction that characterizes Ditjobotla. The other red dots I would want to point out are in the Eastern Cape. You'll see that Makana and Sundays River Valley continue to have disclaimers of audit opinion, 6 years going now. And you know that Grahamstown and Kirkwood are characterized by dysfunction. In fact, the service delivery problems in Grahamstown are known to all of us. And that's consistent with the governance problems that lead to a repeat disclaimer, where the people in charge of that municipality really have no regard for transparency and accountability, and it translates even to what happens on service delivery matters. The provincial treasury in the Eastern Cape, together with the provincial COPTA, tried to support these municipalities. They developed financial recovery plans, they developed municipal improvement plan, and those just went unimplemented by those two municipalities. So it needs a different treatment, more than one that can happen through administration or through the administration. And then there's Kanaland in the Western Cape, which has had a disclaimer for the last 3 years, and it is one that has got a number of governance challenges brought upon by the coalition arrangements in that council. But at least we're moving in the right direction. I think that's one thing I would like you to take away from this slide. On this slide, we give you a sense of the respective provinces. As I indicated, we've been able to engage with each of the provinces at the level of the executive and the legislature. Maybe just a couple of highlights for your attention. Of the 41 clean audits, 20 are in the Western Cape. However, you even see that in the Western Cape, the outcomes are going backwards. They're losing a few clean audits. They've got a disclaimer in the form of Kanaland. They've got an adverse in the form of Lensburg. So there's quite a bit of work to be done by the province in the Western Cape to bring back the governance disciplines within municipalities. I'd like to also point out, while we're talking about clean audits, that the Free State and the North and the Northwest have not seen a clean audit for many, many years. In fact, the Free State last had a clean audit at Fezile Dabi district back in 2016. It's going to take some doing to get to a point where there is at least one clean audit in the province. The reason it's important to drive at least one is that it gives the people that run municipality a sense of what's possible. There's an example that people can look to. It also, I have to say, gives some inspiration to the team I lead. You can only imagine how deflating it must be to have to keep auditing in an environment where there is no attention to driving accountability improvements over time, because that's what this tells you. The Gauteng province, which sits at the center of much of our economic activity as a country and houses 3 of our biggest metros, that province has not gone ahead in terms of any improvements. In fact, what we've seen is that the metros are going backwards rather than forward. KZN, we've seen some improvement over time, however, still a great deal of work to be done to get to a point where that set of improvements is felt by the citizens of the province. Similar in the Eastern Cape, some encouraging improvements, fewer disclaimers, a couple more clean audits, however, still a great deal of work to be done to ensure that governance and proper financial and performance management are felt by the residents of the respective towns. I also want to point out that Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and the Northern Cape are also not really moving in the right direction. You'll see that if we improve 6, you'll find 5 going backwards. If you improve 6, you'll find 3 going backwards. So there is still no stable push in terms of the right direction. And the evidence you would have seen being quite clear in the lived experience of people in those provinces. One thing I want to highlight about Limpopo, because we'll talk about it just now, is that they've tended to rely on using consultants to get their financials right. And that's been a trend for many, many years. Unfortunately, it continues even when there have been undertakings to remedy the situation. One of the things I hold in my heart around clean audits, because sometimes people think clean audits are a technical thing and it doesn't translate into how you live, right? Midval is the municipality in Gauteng that has had a clean audit for over 10 years. So when we visit the teams, I always ask them about how it's like to audit different institutions. So when we were talking about Midval, I asked the team, I said, guys, what's it like to audit Midval? Tell me, who audits it? Put up your hand. This gentleman puts up his hand. He says, man, when I audit Midval, I have some problems. I said, what's the problem? He said, no, you see, I get speed traps every time I drive to the audit. What do you mean? He says, no, because the roads are good. That's the thing. Then I said, tell me, what else about Midval? They said, well, the municipal buildings are in good shape. They said that the pool, the council-owned pool, is in good shape. I asked them a bit more about how it is to audit municipalities that have clean outcomes. And they tell us about basic disciplines in those environments. One told me about another municipality where they were auditing, and they said, when we submit financial requests for information as part of our audit, the rules in the office say the person from whom we're requesting this information has 5 days within which to give it back to us. In environments where where people have clean audits, we find that they are quick about giving us this information. The ones with disclaimers, you must wait those 5 days and still follow up. There was a province, I think it was the Free State, where they had not seen a clean audit for a long time. So I said, you know what, you guys, maybe you've lost your sense of what a clean audit feels like. Why don't you go visit someone else? Join another team, because we're a big office. Go join another team that's auditing a municipality that's got a clean outcome. The following year, I asked the individual that went, I said, how was it? This person says, I was so surprised. In the morning, I gave the CFO a request for information, and I thought I would wait the 5 days as I'm used to in the Free State. He says, well, by the time I drove home, I got a call from the CFO that said to me, please, I have sent you an email with the attachment of the information you asked me for. If you can't open that attachment, meet me in my office at 7:30 tomorrow morning and I'll give you the flash disk. Because I was shocked. Now, these are basics, right? These are basic things that should prevail in every environment, in every single public institution. The next slide, honorable members, deals with the financial statements. This one is about us highlighting that when you've got unqualified opinion, it doesn't always indicate that financial management disciplines are sound. You might recall that when I talked about the unqualified opinions, I said 71 of them gave us poor quality financial statements. So this analysis basically says, when we started the audit, only 63 municipalities of the 257 gave us quality financial statements. By the time we finished, we were able to get, through a combination of the clean and the unqualified, 140 credible financial statements. The difference is that people could correct financial statements whilst we were auditing. And you'll see that the metros are not any better in terms of quality financial statements. We raise this because it tells us that even though in the main we've got skilled CFOs, we haven't got the disciplines of doing the basics during the year. It tells us that internal audit is not doing well. It tells us that audit committees are also not doing well. It also tells us that the action plans that are developed at the end of the previous year's audit are not being implemented, because if they were implemented, things would improve. The areas where a lot of municipalities struggle with financial statements relate to receivables, which is debtors, making sure that you know who owes you what money and that you're collecting from them regularly and you manage your debtors book. When you've got so many municipalities struggling with that, it tells you that they're not billing correctly, they're not collecting properly, they're not managing that debtors book. They also struggle, our municipalities, with accounting for their property, plant and equipment and infrastructure assets. This might sound like, well, that's a technical thing that auditors are worried about. What it tells you is that they don't have a sense of where their assets are, how many they have, what condition they are in. And the reason they don't do that is because they also don't have a maintenance plan, and certainly not one that they're implementing regularly. So we flag this not just as an accountant's problem, but as a management problem, which has grave consequences for revenue going forward and for service delivery going forward. And on the next slide, we point out that, you can go to the next slide, thank you, and it's an old message which you will recall, where we highlight the ongoing over-reliance on using consultants. The problem is not on using consultants per se. The problem is on ongoing reliance that's inappropriate and on bad quality spend. You'll see that this year, 219 municipalities spent together 1.47 billion rand on consultants purely for the purpose of helping them compile financial statements. Last year, we reported 1.37 billion, so you'll see that the number is not really changing. This when there are CFOs in place and there are finance functions that are populated with people that have been appointed. We also note that municipalities that get disclaimers of audit opinion also still spend on consultants, on average 6 million rand. Municipalities with adverse also spend on consultants. The ones with qualified also spend on consultants. It tells us then that there are key questions we have to ask about why is it that even when there's staff in place and there are consultants being appointed, we still get bad quality submissions. So we keep asking our teams this, and we've been asking them this for the last 10 years. And the answer says, the issue here, and you'll see it on that round circle, the issue here is that in most instances, the work of the consultants is not being reviewed. They say, well, there's 2% where the consultants didn't deliver, but much of the problem is either consultants are appointed late, the underlying documents are not available, or that their work is not being managed properly by the people that appointed them. But I believe that the part that should worry us all is that green part, the light green, which says the work of consultants was not adequately reviewed. What it tells you is that you've got CFOs and finance staff in place. They appoint consultants every year. And then, once the consultant is there, they basically leave their desks and say the consultant must engage with the auditors, which in our view, it tells a story about culture and discipline, more than even skills. There is an element where the people under the CFO, there are some who are appointed and don't have the skill to do the basics. However, much of the problem, we believe, in local government, especially in this area of overusing consultants, relates to the part about discipline. The next slide deals with a matter that we would have raised last year as well, which is that we are concerned about the deteriorating financial health of municipalities. When you've got years and years of poor financial management, you're going to have problems on financial viability going forward. Yes, there are some municipalities that are unviable by design, right? They don't have the revenue base that one would expect. However, we are highlighting that even when the resources are available, they're not well managed. The culture of approving unfunded budgets remains a problem. This year, 113 municipalities approved unfunded budgets. This despite the fact that the provincial treasury would have reviewed the budget and given advice, or the national treasury for metros would have given advice. Municipalities continue to approve unfunded budgets. Many of these, of the 113, 86 of them were doing it for the last 3 years consecutively. So it's become a culture. And of course, when you have an unfunded budget, it means as you start, you know that you have expenditure that you can't fund. So what happens? You end up with a deficit, and an overdraft situation. You don't pay your creditors, and then you try and keep covering this hole every single year. And of course, then if you've got this sort of scenario, the things that you should be doing year on year remain undone, like maintenance. We also are highlighting that even when these unfunded budgets are approved, we still see unauthorized expenditure, meaning that where you've got expenditure levels approved, people are spending beyond that. And that's why you end up with unauthorized expenditure. And of course, that then compromises the financial health of those municipalities going forward. Many of them ended up with a deficit situation, and many of them have got major creditors that they don't pay, such as the ESCOM, Water Board, etc. Suppliers and creditors to municipalities are waiting on average 286 days to receive the money that's due to them, because cash flow has become very tight across many municipalities. And of course, what happens is when suppliers are not paid, many of them charge interest and penalties. Much of that ends up as fruitless and wasteful expenditure. This year, the National Treasury worked with ESCOM to design the ESCOM Debt Relief Program, which was aimed at helping municipalities enter into a settlement arrangement with ESCOM and also have some disciplined action to manage their cash flows and expenditure habits. It's not working. 84% of the municipalities that participate in that program are not complying with the conditions that they subscribed to. Again, in many instances, that's a discipline issue. We're also seeing that some of the expenditure problems relate to how indigent benefits are being dealt with. So part of the equitable share that comes out of the National Revenue Fund goes into municipalities to help them support indigent families. We're seeing that municipalities mismanage these funds. They either don't have a register that's well updated, so they end up paying benefits to people who are deceased. They end up offering benefits to people who are even in their employ or in the employ of the state, or are even suppliers to that municipality or to other parts of the state. Basically, you've got far too many people benefiting from the indigent policies and the indigent funds that shouldn't benefit. And then you've got people who should be benefiting left without access to those benefits. And these are funds that as Parliament you would have agreed are important to make available to support families that are under pressure, and unfortunately we're seeing that they are not getting that benefit. I come now to matters around performance management and reporting. When I talked about the metros, I largely dealt with this in terms of saying that we're seeing that there's too little attention to the management of performance. Municipalities can do the tick boxing. So they'll tick a box and say we've done our IDP. But no one really worries about the content of that IDP, whether it is giving expression to the things that they should be doing. Sometimes we see that their performance plans give no sense of how they're going to do basics like deliver water, for example. It'll include all sorts of other things. That IDP is supposed to go to the MEC COGTA and that department to be reviewed. You can tick a box and say it's been reviewed, but then the substance of that work is found wanting. And then it's approved by council. Then the annual plan is done. Similar sort of cycle. When we review that annual plan and the ultimate report, we find that some of the critical things that municipalities should be doing are not given expression to in that plan. So if you don't plan to do stuff, it's not going to happen. And then we also find that the indicators that are there are not really geared to driving real attention to impactful service delivery. And then we also find that the performance report, the scorecard at the end of the day, is not one that is credible. The reason this is important is that even if you haven't done what you were supposed to do, at least be accountable for it. At least be transparent and be accountable for the choices you've made. The fact that this area of performance reporting remains in such poor shape and in many ways is done as a tick boxing measure, reflects poorly on how seriously the MMs, the mayors, the internal auditors, the audit committees, and the councils take performance, how importantly they take it. In fact, we say that there are far too many of them across the system that don't take this area as seriously as what they should. As part of our work, we have continued to invest time and resources to go and look at projects, at infrastructure projects, much as we did in the last year. And I want to remind the honourable members that the people who go and inspect projects are not bean counters, as I am. There are people who've actually got skills in the engineering and the quantity surveying field, people who can actually tell you whether a bridge is in good condition or not, people who can actually assess the phase of a project. We've actually been able to build that capability within Team AGSA over a number of years. This year we went to 113 projects. We selected projects mostly in the metros and in those that have disclaimers of audit opinion. What we found that the majority of projects had problems. 77% of the projects we visited had problems. Either they were delayed, there were cost overruns, there was poor quality work, or even when things were completed, they were not being used optimally. And then we also identified matters around the inadequate maintenance of infrastructure. The reason this exists, in our view, is that even if performance agreements are done as a tick boxing exercise, they are not monitored. And sometimes we find that contractors are appointed, and they're appointed poorly through a procurement process that is not in compliance with the law and one that does not lead to the best decision. So then the contractor that's appointed is one that's not equal to the task. Then they are not managed by the people in the municipality. That contract management capability is not there. So the municipality doesn't have employees within it that have a set of standard operating procedures, a set of disciplines, and even a set of skills to monitor the performance of those contractors. And worse still, even once they've seen problems with the performance of the contractor, they don't hold them accountable. They don't follow through on what sits in the agreement around how to hold that contractor accountable. In a nutshell, what this all leads to is that we end up with much money spent on projects that don't see the light of day, that citizens do not benefit from. And so as we think about the capability of municipalities, we've got to think beyond the debits and credits. Do you have a CFO that can do the books? We've equally got to be seized with asking questions about whether there are enough skills and disciplines to give us assurance that the money we put into municipalities to drive infrastructure projects will be well spent. The sad reality we have now is that having looked at the metros, far too few of them have that capability. The projects in the metros are problematic. Other than the city of Cape Town, many projects in the metros go in the wrong direction. And this obviously also causes harm to the public that then is exposed to infrastructure that is either incomplete or in disrepair. I come now to the matters around compliance. This is also a stuck record sort of moment because we would have said exactly the same thing last year. Other than the municipalities that have got clean audits, you've got the majority of municipalities with material compliance findings, mostly in the area of procurement and contract management. In a nutshell, it tells us that we do not yet have a culture, a set of controls, a set of operating procedures, and even accountability mechanisms that ensure that the rules are indeed complied with. And as you can see, the metros are not any better. And given their significant budgets, one would have thought that this area of procurement would enjoy tremendous attention by the people that hold the purse. I think I'm going to skip this slide because I think it says much of what we would have said before. And then the matter around the material irregularities. As the honourable members know, back in 2019, the powers of the AG were amended, and we were given the responsibility to look carefully at areas of non-compliance and to flag areas where we believe that material financial loss was happening, or where we could see that there is harm being caused to institutions or harm to the public, or even misuse of material public resources. And the law says that if we should see that, then we are supposed to notify the accounting officer, give him or her the time and space to implement the corrective action. The other thing we can do is we can refer matters for investigation to other public bodies, and the other matter the other action we can take is to take remedial action. I'm pleased to say that we've continued on this journey. We've identified material irregularities. We've been able to get accounting officers to act on some of them and to get money back that was being lost. On a cumulative level, we had identified MIs that were leading to financial loss that were estimated at 8.74 billion rand. Over time, out of that, 700 million rand has come back, and 244 million rand of financial losses have been prevented, and 370 million rand are financial losses that are in the process of being recovered, leading to resource protection of 1.32 billion rand on a cumulative level. Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, last year I would have reported on similar figures. Last year the number of resource protection that compares to the 1.32 billion rand was just over 900 million rand. I point this out to say that the pace at which things are happening is slow. We're not recovering money in the way that we had hoped to. And this should worry all of us, because it tells us that the people entrusted with protecting public funds are not only preventing problems, but even when problems arise, they are very slow to act on those problems. They're very slow to get money back. They're very slow to discipline their staff. They're slow to make sure that they protect resources. In the municipal space, we really are seeing a slowdown in action on our MIs. So the instrument is not quite having the impact we would have hoped for. We find also another impediment to progress is the instability at MM level. What happens is we make progress heading towards a certificate of debt, and then the MM is changed or moved somewhere else. Then you have to start again. We cannot overstate this. The route to better governance, better performance, better resource protection is to prevent the problems to begin with and to take swift action as soon as they arise. We've had some successes with getting people to submit financial statements because we issued MIs when they were not submitting. We've had some success with getting them to deal with disclaimers, because we took the view that if you have a repeat disclaimer, like let's say at Maludia Pofong, you are harming the institution that should be serving the people of Harrismith. We've also been able to issue MIs where people don't submit performance information, and that's coming right now. Another interesting area has been where we have used our powers to get accounting officers to attend to wastewater treatment plants that were in disrepair. Because through our infrastructure work, we were able to see assets that were not functioning well and causing harm. So we took the view that you're harming the public, you're harming the environment, so you must deal with it. So we've seen some good responses in that regard. Some of the matters we've had to refer to the Department of Water and Sanitation, as well as the department charged with environmental affairs for their further attention. And then we've also seen instances where municipal infrastructure that's been invested in is not being utilized in the way that it should be. In a nutshell, I want to leave a message that says the National Audit Office continues to implement its power to good effect. However, we are concerned that the responsiveness within the system is not commensurate with what the moment demands when you've got diminishing resources and growing needs from a service delivery point of view. The behavior of accounting officers and mayors and speakers and MECs is not reflecting the type of urgency that this moment requires in our view. And if we don't get that right, we're not going to reverse the slide in local government. We're not going to get local government to shift towards better performance, accountability, and transparency. And I'm now getting towards the end of my input. I want to just highlight that in our report, we've spent quite a bit of time unpacking the role of the MECs of COCTA, much as I indicated to yourselves, especially around the performance planning and their monitoring of performance. We've even picked out specific parts of the law that indicate what these specific roles would be. So the Municipal Systems Act provides that the MEC of COCTA in every province must compile a report that analyzes the performance of each municipality. And that report must include remedial action that MEC is taking and or that municipality is taking. And that report must go to the provincial legislature for their attention. That sits in the law as it stands. The law also provides that the MEC of COCTA ought to provide the provincial legislature every year with an analysis of how municipalities are responding to the audit findings and recommendations from the Auditor-General. And the MEC must provide that report to the legislature for their attention. We have found that those reports are either not done. If they're done, they're done very late in the day. And they're also either not tabled in the legislature, and if they are tabled, they're not dealt with in the legislature. We include this in the report because, as I said when I dealt with the ecosystem of accountability, we believe wholeheartedly that if MECs did their part, they wouldn't be lurching from crisis to crisis. If the provincial legislatures did their part, they wouldn't be waiting for the AG to say there's a disclaimer here. They would be monitoring these movements as a matter of course. The Municipal Systems Act also provides that the National Minister of COCTA should compile a report that consolidates the MEC's reports from across the country that basically deals with performance of each municipality and the remedial action, and that report must go to the legislature for your consideration as honorable members that oversee local government. We have found that that report is often not done, and if it's done late, and there isn't yet a rhythm within the legislature to process that report. The report that was tabled recently, I think in January 2025, from the National Minister of COCTA, related to the 2022 audits. The summary I want to leave with yourselves is that we have to get every single player in the ecosystem of accountability doing their part. Otherwise, we will not arrest the decline of local government. We've also, in our report, detailed the role of the mayor. We've gone to look at the legislation. We looked at what's provided for in the Municipal Systems Act as well as in the Municipal Finance Management Act. We found that far too many mayors can tick a box, but the substantive issues around how they've executed their duties do not reflect. There shouldn't be unfunded budgets that are the order of the day. There shouldn't be ongoing service delivery problems that are the order of the day. There shouldn't be ongoing poor accountability for performance if these things were being given effect to. So once again, it's about saying, do we have mayors that are aware of their responsibilities and are equipped to competently deal with those obligations on a regular basis? And that's the conversation we believe needs to be had, especially as we're now thinking about the structure of local government and the white paper conversation that the Honourable Minister Tlhabisa is spearheading. I think it's a useful contribution, having looked at the questions that the discussion paper that was gazetted raised. It raises the critical questions. As we think about what needs to change, we should also consider what currently is and is simply not being applied. Because many of our problems are about things that are already in place that are simply being disregarded by the people that are in those roles. Honourable members, I've spoken a great deal. I am now moving to the very last slide, which summarizes our recommendations and our call to action. We've got to deal with the governance failures that prevail in local government, within the institutions as well as in the other spheres of government. We've got to worry about, yes, the administration led by the MM, but we've got to equally worry about the mayor and the speaker and the council. Similarly, we mustn't stop there. We must look at the role that's being played by the provincial executive, the provincial legislature, the national executive, and the national legislature. If we do that, then we'll have some hope of building the capability we need, whether it's skills, competence, ethics, standard operating procedures, policies, technology. We'll only build those things if we sort out the governance arrangements. If we don't deal with governance, we'll never be able to sort out accountability and consequence management. I'll leave you with a story which still keeps me up at night. On one of our audits, there was an irregularity we identified. Payments were going through the bank account of this particular municipality that shouldn't be going through it. We raised this matter with a CFO who's qualified. And we said to her, you've got to deal with these payments. You've got to stop them. She stopped some, but one. When we went to inquire, why would you not stop this one? She simply said, look, you can do what you like, you can recommend, I'm not touching it. Why? I said, well, I value my life. So that story still makes my hair stand because it tells me that unless we deal with these governance failures that arise because of who's in the mayorship, who's in council, unless we deal with those things, we'll never get the municipal sector to do what it's supposed to do. And on that, I rest. Thank you very much, Chair.